Well, I'm a little delayed, but I'm back to do some autumn book reviews and just to explain some of the ones that I read over the past month and a half and some of the ones that I'm currently reading. Maybe you've read them, or maybe it will interest you to read some too. Let me know what you read in the comments. When I was looking for books to read during the autumnal season, I was looking specifically for maybe covers even that looked autumny, and then just subject matter or things that I found interesting in general that maybe aren't very autumnal, but just ones I wanted to read. This was one of the best books I've read within the past month. This is called The Traveling Cat Chronicles. It was written in Japanese and translated. This was written by Hiro Arikawa. This is specifically about a young man who seems to be maybe in his 30s, maybe his late 20s, and he has this cat that he has found. He decides to make it his pet after a little bit of getting to know it on the street. And in the process, he says, you know what, I'm going to go visit some friends. And along the way, and I can't give things away, so this is me doing a spoiler-free review, and it's very difficult. But you get to know this man, and you get to know the cat. You get both perspectives. They will go back and forth between them. You will learn about cats that he once had, and you also learn about the history he has with these people that he goes to visit with his cat. It was a really good book. I loved how it was written, and I found it very whimsical and beautiful. And it was definitely autumnal. It was set mainly in the autumn time. The Familiars. This was a really interesting book. I wasn't really understanding what it was about at first, but I had it in my to-read list for over a year, and I was like, wait, why did I put this in my list? This is about the time period in which people were put on trial as witches. And specifically the main character here, she is pregnant, and she had many struggles in becoming pregnant. So you learn a lot about her story along the way. You learn about her relationship with her husband, and some of her story is very, very difficult to learn, and some of the process as you learn more about her unfolds, and it's rather sad at times. But she has a midwife, and the midwife, she is one that knows a lot about herbs, and she tries to help her with the ability to have a full-term pregnancy. So they form a bond, the two of them, but her midwife is thought to be a witch. So the whole story, it's very, very interesting. This is written for adults, as was the last book that I just talked about. I just love the wording and how it was written. It felt like I was reading classic literature. It was really gorgeous. This one. Now, if you are an American, you probably know about this story. So Newtown, or Newton, I've heard it pronounced both ways. Newtown is in Connecticut, and there was an elementary school that had many children and teachers killed. So this is about the whole situation. It will go step by step into the unfolding of the day, and it is really hard to read. I teared up a lot while reading it. I had to not pay attention to it sometimes. I had a long time to go through this compared to most books because it was difficult subject matter. You also get to know about the killer and what his life was like, and I knew nothing. I know so much about the Columbine school shooting, but this one I really didn't know much. I remember when it happened. My oldest was only 5 when it happened, so that is kind of scary to think that there were children around his age that were killed. Very hard pill to swallow, but this was a very well-written book. I think that the author really did a great job investigating everything and didn't go like too far off on topics, stuck to us learning about each child. We got to learn about some of the teachers. I thought that was very good, and again, very sad. Place to Hang the Moon. At first I was recommended this book, and I wasn't sure what I would think about it. This is a children's book. It's a middle grade book. One of the characters is named Edmund, so at first I was like, this is very much a fan of the Chronicles of Narnia, just because the plot is about 3 children, not 4, but 3 children during World War II who grow up in London. These kids are orphans. They are sent to the country to live in hopes of finding someone that maybe will keep them after the war. and that is the task. So you get to learn about each child, what their personalities are like. They love reading. They love books so much. So you have, like in this picture of them with all these books. So it's set around them reading a lot. They go to the library a lot. And you learn about each family that maybe they are sent off to live with. It is very good. I'm glad that I got over my fear of it being like Narnia. It was just in the same setting, and just the character, one of them that was a little bit of a troublemaker, just so happened to have the same name as one of the Narnia characters. But definitely this was beautiful. I fully enjoyed it. The only one left. This one I have seen many people on YouTube that have been reading this. This is a new book, and I was like, okay, it seems pretty interesting. I'm curious to learn more about it. This one, again, is an adult book. I think there was one bad word throughout it, maybe two, which I really appreciate that they didn't like throw so much of it. But it is set, I think, in the 80s. Yes, it's set in the 80s, and it's about this one woman who is a caretaker. She is sent to this mansion up above, you could see the picture here. This is pretty much where she was sent. And this house is just on this cliff. And it's set, I think, in Maine. There's an old woman who lives at the top of this hill. She owns this house, and she does not speak. She can't move very well. She is pretty much almost paralyzed, but she could move like one of her arms, and she can move like her head, but she can't really move anything else. She has been said to have murdered her whole family. And so there's even a rhyme that is taught to the people that live in that area. So the caretaker even knows the rhyme. She's always wanted to know if she really did it. Therefore, this is a mystery of trying to find out the story of this woman. But in the process, you also find out about the caretaker, and they learn a lot about one another, how maybe they have some sort of connection to each other. I thought it was very intriguing. I got really sucked into this one. I love a good mystery, a murder mystery. This is completely different from all the topics that I mentioned. The Well-Watered Woman. This has a very pretty cover. This is a Christian book. For those who are not religious, you could just skip me talking about this. But this is centered on how you can be able to grow in understanding people better. Even if you don't feel like you're at your best, God sees you. The author talks about her struggles. She says how she was a bit of a people pleaser, and how she really wishes that she were not that way, and how to be more inclined to want to build herself as a better, more confident person in the Lord. She talks about some of her difficult situations as a mother, and she would ask a lot of times for God to help her through things. I enjoyed this book a lot, actually. It was written with a very kind spirit, and I appreciate that, where there's no judgment, there's no trying to tell people how to live their life, and she's pretty much explaining her own understanding and then how she learned through her own way of living. Apple, Skin to the Core. This one's about a Native American who is living in an area growing up during more like 60s, 70s, but he's on a reservation. He calls it the Res throughout the book. But the interesting part about this book is it's written in prose. It's not rhyming, but he's got some sort of poetry. You'll see a lot of breaks, like the word will go like this. And I don't like that. It was very hard for me to read, but I enjoyed his story, even though it was weird to read. I really loved learning about his time growing up and how he had to deal with a lot of racism and his own family going through their own struggles. Even he talks about how his family members were raised in the schools to try to change their culture. And then the fact that when he went to school, they still were trying to change their culture, but not as deeply. But he talks throughout it about his love for the Beatles, and I really love the Beatles, so I found that connection to be very nice. It was good to learn. He explains why this is called Apple if you read it. This one wasn't as good of a book as some of the other ones I read in this time period, but that's just because I couldn't take the way he wrote it, but his story was fine. 4,000 Weeks, Time Management for Mortals. This book was kind of boring. I'll be honest, I think it's good if you want to learn how to have time management, then definitely this will encourage you of how you can do that a little bit better. This is something that I'm pretty good with time management. It's a little harder with an infant now, but I know how to get things done. And I always was fascinated with the whole concept of being able to know what you want to do in a day and how long maybe it takes to do those things. This also talks really well about slowing down and enjoying your moment where you are in it instead of trying to speed through things, trying to not, like, I talk a lot about slow living. So this one is very good if you are interested in slow living. There's a philosophical message throughout it too. I'm going to state there is one use of the F word in this book. I don't think that was necessary. This whole book was very professional sounding, and then you threw that in. That bothered me. I don't really feel like reading that in, like, I understand it being put in some books, but it had nothing to do with this book. There was no reason for it. But anyway, it wasn't one of my favorites that I read. Lost Coast Literary. This was really cute. I don't think it was as good. I feel like, see how this book, it looks kind of like the cover from the other one that I mentioned, where they're kind of on a hill. This one is set in California. So this is about a young woman. She doesn't really know her family growing up. Her dad kind of kept her away from her family, and she wants to get to know them and doesn't know what happened to cause the situation where she stopped talking to her grandmother, and her grandmother dies and leaves her this house. And her family is kind of upset that she got it because she wasn't around enough. But she goes to California to try to maybe sell the house. She learns that she has this special ability. And so when you're reading it, all of a sudden you're like, what? This is like a magical story? So apparently her grandmother had this sort of task set for her. What that task is, I won't go into, but basically it has to do with the fact that her granddaughter, the main character, she is someone that works in the industry of publishing books and writing and editing. This was very cute. I will say, I don't know how to explain this where I can't give things away, but it was cute. If you really like books and writing, this one's a fun one. This one is definitely like on the autumn / end of summer type of side. And so that's when I read this book. A Game of Fox and Squirrels. This is a middle grade book. It is rather cute. It's about a young girl, and she and her sister, they move in with their aunt, which it's interesting how many of these middle school books I've been reading, or high school books even, where a kid has to live with their family member, an aunt usually. I find that strange because if you have been to my other reviews recently, there are like 4 of those or something. So anyway, she's living with her sister, with her aunt. Her aunt is married to another woman. So if that causes you issues, if you have young children and you're not ready to explain to them about same-sex marriage, then I'd say skip this one. As an adult, being able to read this, I'm able to enjoy the story. Her aunt gives her a birthday present, and it's a game. It's a card game. She wants to play this card game with her aunt, but things happen where they just don't get the chance. She starts playing it on her own, and in the process, she sees this fox that's alive and sets tasks for her to do. And she has to decide if she's going to follow through. She really, really wants to go home, but it's not really a good idea that she goes home. And so you learn her story and even a little bit of her sister's story of why they couldn't be at home anymore, even though she really misses being home, being with her friends. But it teaches her, is like one of those, she's like finding herself type of stories. And it's very autumnal, very cute. Like I said, the main character, she gets through some of her own situations, and it's one of those books where you're like, oh, she's a child. I wish I could help her, you know? Anyway, so that's that book. With the Fire on High, I really wanted to love this book. The school year has begun. This is, I believe she's like a junior in high school, maybe a senior, and she has had a child already. Her child is now about 4 years old, 3 years old. She's doing her best to be able to provide for her grandmother that she lives with, as well as raise her own daughter. She's very hardworking and she loves to cook, and she gets an opportunity to go to another country. So my problem with this book is it was very basic. Like, I didn't find there was anything interesting that really caught my attention, that really pulled me in. I wanted to be pulled in. And when I got through it, I was like, oh, good, it's over. And that's sad. I saw so many high reviews about this book, so I was getting excited, and then I was let down. Holy Hygge. Now, I was trying to ask someone I know who's Danish how to pronounce Hygge, and like I was even saying it, and I said, did I say it right? And he's like, it's a hard word for someone that's not a Danish speaker to say. And so anyway, Hygge is the best way that we can pretty much say it. This is written by a woman who's married to a Danish man, and she has several children. They live in Minnesota, but they have lived in Denmark as well. She talks about her own family and learning about how the Danish people live. And so she explains her own process of trying to find a way to maybe make her home, and the way she lives her life to reflect both a Danish lifestyle of simplicity and enjoying what they have, and to be cozy. Hygge is basically where it means cozy. Now here, by the way, it says hygge underneath the word, if you could see that, but I just keep hearing it in different ways, so I did my best. But anyway, this is also a Christian book. She talks a lot about God throughout this. It is very good. I had fun reading it. I had wanted to read this for over a year, so I thought, you know what, this is the cozy season when a lot of people are like thinking about staying inside and making things warm, and therefore I was like, I need to read this. But it was good. Howl's Moving Castle. Now, I had no idea this was a book. This is in fact a book series. There are 3 books. I only read the first book so far. I hope to in the future read the other 2 books. Yes, there is a Studio Ghibli movie. I saw it in theaters when it originally came out in like 2003 or whenever that was. I love this movie. I've seen it several times. I wanted to read what the book version was, and they are very similar. There are some differences. You have a lot more of the fact that Sophie, the main character, she is the eldest daughter out of 3, and she makes hats, and it was her father's business. Mainly, eldest daughters are not as cared for as like the youngest daughters. She ends up causing an issue with this one witch. It's the Witch of the Waste. She gets cursed, and she looks like an old lady now. So Sophie, she ends up becoming a housekeeper for this wizard named Howl. She finds a lot of people are cursed, and she wants to help people. It was very cute. It focused a lot more on issues of the heart, how you need to be able to grow and better yourself, but it was so charming. Beating Guns, Hope for People Who Are Weary of Violence. Shane Claiborne is one of my favorite authors. I've read several of his books. I really, really feel like things that he says I am drawn to. He is very fond of the Mennonite lifestyle, so I think that has a lot to do with it. So Beating Guns this is another Christian book, but I feel everyone should probably read this, and because of anything he says about God. He gives so many statistics as well as these great examples of why maybe gun laws need to be changed a bit. Even the Mennonites, they believe very much in having peace between people, and to love our enemies as ourselves, and to love our neighbors. So Beating Guns is based off of a scripture verse that talks about beating your swords into plowshares. So that way you can, instead of making tools of violence, you're making tools for growth to help provide for you and your necessary foods and such. So he actually wrote this with Michael Martin, who is a part of this shop that they have, where they literally take guns and they make instead garden tools. They've made other things as well, and they sell them. So he gives lots of examples, and I just think it is so smart and so well written, and it makes you think. And he gives examples about even how gun laws in other countries are different from the ones in the US. And I know a lot of people are afraid in the US that if you take the gun laws away, there's going to be where the government then has the guns and all these other things. But he explains how America really needs to step it up and change things, and how much death is around it. And he talks about different shootings, including the school shooting that I read about as well. And he names the victims even, and tries to talk about how things like that could be prevented. This is a book I am currently reading, My Mother, a Serial Killer. This has been on my to-read list for like 3 years, and I'm like, oh good, I can finally read it. So I'm more than halfway through this book. It is set in Australia, and it says it's written by Hazel Barron, who is the daughter. But the thing is that throughout reading it, you get a different, I guess the Janet Fife Yeomans is the person that really writes this while like talking about Hazel's perspective. But it's not, so even though this is my mother, a serial killer, she doesn't write it from her own perspective. It's someone writing it on her behalf. So just so you know that right off the bat, I want to let you know that. But it has been very interesting so far how they talk about different people that maybe her mother murdered. She's the reason why her mother was caught, because she spoke up, but it took her a while to do so because she was in control of her daughter, you know? So far it's been pretty good. I'm not like amazed by the book, but I've enjoyed it. It's probably going to be like a 3-star book. And because of the season coming up, I know a lot of people that celebrate Halloween. Maybe you do not. I have never really celebrated it. Halloween Party is an Agatha Christie book, and if you saw one of my other reviews, I've been reading through all of Agatha Christie's, her one series. This is like book 40 something, so I went out of order because I need to read like the 7th book. There is a new film that has come out called A Haunting in Venice, as you see on this cover. I chose this cover for that reference. And they have nothing to do with each other. So I seen the trailer and I started this book, and I have a ways to go still. And there's a young girl who is murdered at a Halloween party. It's not a pretty way that she was murdered, but then, you know, you have the investigator, Poirot, comes in and tries to find out who murdered her. While A Haunting in Venice, the film, it looks like it's very seance-y, and there's all adults, and it's set in like Venice, while Halloween Party is set in like England. So it's very different. I don't know why they say that A Haunting in Venice is based off of this. It really isn't, guys. They have nothing to do with each other. But anyway, so far it's not that bad. There have been some interesting, weird things that I've got from this. They like even called this 13-year-old girl sexy, and that's like, no, 13-year-olds are not sexy. They're little girls. So Agatha Christie, I don't know why she wrote that in there, but she talks a lot about attractiveness, and that's where I am so far. It doesn't matter if someone's attractive, really. She's dead. We'll see how this goes. I don't think I'll be able to explain to you like the final product, what I think, but you could always ask me in the future and I'll let you know my thoughts. I do have a Goodreads account, so if you want to find me on there, we could connect that way and you can read my reviews. Thanks so much. Again, let me know what you are reading, or tell me what you read over the past months. These are what I read starting in September through now. So right now, this is October 9th. So maybe tell me what you have read and maybe what you want to read throughout October, and I'll get into November as well. So I'll probably do my next review in November so we can see how things are. I want to read throughout October more books that maybe are about true crime, maybe some cute romance things that are sweet, maybe some dinner type of books because Thanksgiving is coming, and just the idea of meals, maybe some more Native American type of stuff to explain how I want to be an ally to them. Thanksgiving, I love the time that families have together. What are you going to read? Bye.